It doesn't take much to figure out that Donald Trump lies. Everybody knows that. He lies all the time. And the problem, of course, is if you lie, people who are making their decision based on your lies, you're just manipulating them. That's not a good thing. You got to tell the truth.
Welcome to What Would Our Kupuna Do? This is Richard Ha's vlog, which looks at what we can do today to make Hawaii Island a more sustainable place to live, so our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren won't be priced out of here, and they'll be able to stay in Hawaii and live good lives here. Today, we're talking about truth and Trump. In our last podcast, Richard, we talked about some of your experiences in Vietnam, and you mentioned that the first time you heard Donald Trump talk, it had to do with him talking about Vietnam. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the first time it came to my attention was when he mentioned, or someone mentioned that he got a deferment because of a bone spur. And that made me kind of raise my eyebrows. And then the next thing that happened was when he said that President Obama was not born in the U.S. He was a foreigner. And everybody in Hawaii knows he was born here and went to Punahou School. So right off the bat, I said, wait a minute. He just lied right there. That's important to me as far as making decisions, based on truth or lies, because you cannot make good decisions if what you're making your decisions on is not true. And that's what my first impression of President Trump was.
I get the impression that some people think he avoided going to Vietnam and that was an excuse. And also he's sort of shown he doesn't respect veterans with some of his words.
Yeah, then that was my first impression, that it was an excuse. And because all of us, we depended on each other, and we all come back or nobody comes back. We had that kind of attitude, because when push came to shove, no matter where you were raised, we were all in this together. It was just unimaginable that anybody would use an excuse like that to get out of going to Vietnam. But to do that on purpose didn't even enter my mind. That couldn't be real. I just raised my eyebrows at that point. And then little by little, another thing came up and another thing came up, another thing came up. It's the same thing. It just got worse and worse.
Yeah. So you think he's telling lies because
he's manipulating people. That's just really what it is. When you do that, you don't really have much respect for people when you're manipulating people like that. And the more he does it, the more I disrespect the idea that he's doing it.
It comes across as for his own purposes, which is so not what we need at that highest point of leadership in our country.
It starts to get into deeper and deeper meaning and implications. For example, we're all about aloha here in Hawaii. If you stop and think what aloha means, and you compare that to Donald Trump, what Donald Trump is doing is not aloha. It's not complex to me, It's just, doing it again. That's not what we need in a leader for the free world. And, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I fought for the right of people to say what they want to say, to express themselves. But what Trump is doing is manipulating people to come out with results that's he predetermined in his own mind. And every time I look at it, it looks very selfish. It doesn't look aloha to me.
It's sort of anti-aloha. Maybe aloha is only discussed in the context of Hawaii, but at its very basis, it's about caring about other people.
There's one aspect of aloha I'd like to expound about, and that is the ancient Hawaiians did not have medals, which meant they had no money, which meant that the more you give, the more you receive, because there's no way to do the exchange without reciprocity. So that's how their economic system worked, reciprocity. And they took it one step further than that. What they did was they considered all living things to be divine brethren, meaning humans were no more important than other living things. In the way they describe it is that's why you get the fish people and the bird people, tree people. Essentially what they're doing is they're making sure that your whole environment is taking care of each other. To me, that's the basis of aloha when you look at it a bigger, deeper. And it's very simple, and it makes a lot of sense, and it worked for people for thousands of years. So when I look at the lying part, it just doesn't fit. Like I said, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I'm a proud Vietnam veteran. And I have a lot of respect for the folks that we were together in the war. We didn't think about it in political terms. We thought about it in terms of protecting each other. Anyway, that influenced me the rest of my life, that idea about taking care of each other. So I feel very, very strongly about it. And not only that, he actually called veterans suckers and losers. How is that even possible? The people you depend on to protect our country, and that's what you think of them. I try not to worry myself too much about what he's trying to do because I'm not voting for him. That's all there is to it. And what is beyond my comprehension is I felt this way for a long, long time. I just didn't worry about it. I just kind of noticed it. But the further we go along, I cannot believe that he actually is more concerned about himself, period. So now if you have a form of government that you rely on one person's judgment, is that better than have 10 people sitting around looking at a problem and discussing it and coming to a conclusion? Which one is better? To me, having that big group of people having a discussion to come to the conclusion that affects everybody. There are others like Putin and North Korean president, China. One person make all the decision and suppress the presence. I put them all in the same category. I don't think that's productive. I think we should stick together with the allies who believe in our way of thinking. We get stronger that way. To go off on our own and team up with Putin and them, I don't think it's the right thing.
When you talked about him going on and on and on about Barack Obama not being born in Hawaii, I had a friend who's older. She's just passed away recently, but she was an anthropology student at the University of Hawaii at the same time as Barack Obama's mother. And when Obama's mother went into the hospital to have the baby, she and all the other anthropology students went to see the baby at Kapiolani Hospital.
Oh, is that
She said, I know for sure he was born here.
Oh my.
But there's so many stories. I mean, it's a small place and everybody knows somebody who, went to school with him or this or that.
Absolutely. And actually, we're fortunate that we live in Hawaii because, in Hawaii, if you have a meeting, let's say, and it's one-sided and it's politically driven, then you'll have a meeting after the meeting to talk about what you really wanted to talk about. It's just us here, everybody talks story. And, you spend a lot of time trying to find what is the moral characteristic of the person you're talking to. The first thing you do is you try to figure out who that person is inside. And then you make your decision based on what moral compass drives that other person. To me, that's how I make my decision. And then once I decide which way to go, I'm very loyal, but not for just any reason. I need to kind of evaluate, think about it a little bit, and then you start asking other people and other people's friends and whatever until you get a good picture of who that person is, and they become friends for life.
Why do you think so many people are such adamant followers of Donald Trump?
It's so hard I really am not sure. They want to believe for the reasons they want to believe. But, I cannot help but think it's not a big majority of people. Like, for example, now, all these different cases he's involved in, once they go to court and it goes through the legal system, that's going to make a huge difference because I think a lot of people are going to look at it that way, whether you're guilty or not guilty of breaking the law in a very serious way. Because in a case like President of the United States, the decision you're making is huge. The implications that the president makes is huge. It's not like just saying nice stuff just so you don't hurt people's feelings. This affects people's lives. So that's why it's so important. And what I'm saying is just my personal opinion. Yeah? Everybody else can have their own opinion. That's fine. But my personal opinion is very strong. From everything Pop told us when I was 10 years old, lines up precisely with how I was taught. Like, for example, he'd say, find 2 answers for every problem, 1 more just in case. So 2 answers for every problem and 1 more just in case. Those 3, if they were all the truth, you could make an analysis and assess risk based on the truth. If they're not, you're not going to come out with the right decision. And if your decision has got to do with the goal that you have in mind for the future, you're not going to make the right decision for the future. So the implications are huge.
What do you worry about if Donald Trump were to be elected president?
I don't worry about it much because there's not much I can do about it. I spend all my time trying to do what I can do here on this island because it's just me. Yeah? What can I do most effectively with my time? I could go out and yell and scream and yell and scream. What would I accomplish? I'm only just one person, right? But if I went out and said, you know what, let's do something so that we can take care of ourselves. Energy is so important because that's what we do work with, energy. And the primary source of energy is food. That's why I spend my time on food and Kyoki and Malia and modern day Ahupua. Now that's something I can do something about. That's the best use of my time. I don't worry about it. I don't think he's going to win, put it that way. Believe it or not, I'm very optimistic. So this doesn't depress me, I think it'll all turn out okay.
Well, that's interesting. Now, why do you say that?
Because as I watch how things are developing, Trump has got to go to court. And as I watch the court proceedings, because I followed it very carefully, what's being said, what the legal parameters are, I'm more optimistic than ever that at some point people are going to start to realize, wait a minute, we can't have somebody who's convicted of a crime. Like for example, what happened at the Capitol, whether it's an insurrection or a group of people that were just gathering together to protest. I'm sorry, they were trying to overthrow our government just so Trump could stay in power. Period. Everybody can see that. His wiggle room is getting less and less and less and less. Like the first thing that happened was he got sued for 87 million or something like that. And then there's a good chance that, coming out of this next one, he's going to be sued even much more, so that punishment will make him stop doing what he's doing.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of What Would Our Kupuna Do? Mahalo for watching, and ahui ho.